Hello there, and welcome back to Hydroponics Daily, your go-to podcast for everything soilless cultivation. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Sharp, and today we're talking about when automation goes wrong. So when it comes to environmental controls in your glasshouse or your grow room, the most basic form is just getting a thermometer or a hygrometer and measuring the temperature and the humidity, and then opening some vents or putting a heater on. After that, it's using a max-min thermometer and hygrometer, then a data logger, and then after that, there's a real step change, and that's using the environmental sensors to automate your grow room or your greenhouse. And that can be when it's set, and the most basic form of that is when the temperature or the humidity goes above or below a certain parameter, certain set point, then it switches on or off. Then after that, you get integrated controllers that take into account more than one variable. So there you have like VPD, so it integrates into VPD and other combinations of different variables. And there's a number of different sensors that have this capability. And then after that, you have AI controllers that use all the sensor data and AI algorithms to look at that, almost like an algorithm is a recipe. And so you feed it the data about the crop and what the current conditions are and what the previous conditions are, and it can steer your crop and things like that. All great, but what happens when it goes wrong? Or what happens when there's a technical malfunction? So the actual controller might not go wrong, but there might be something like one of the vents might break or one of the heaters might burn out, something like that. Well, that's happened on more than one occasion with disastrous results. And there's a story today in the news about one where it's really gone wrong. So a grape greenhouse in the Netherlands, the nursery in Den Haag, Netherlands, has failed. So the vents failed and the greenhouse soared to over 50 degrees Celsius. Let me just check what that is in American money. That is 122 Fahrenheit, so hotter than Florida. And obviously, the automated system was supposed to ventilate the greenhouse, but during the heat wave, it proved ineffective. Outside was over 35 degrees Celsius, so this was during this couldn't have happened at a worse time. And they still don't know why it happened. 95% of the grapes were turned, not killed, but the grapes were unharvestable. So scorched, damaged, and just screwed up. So this wasn't happening to a small grower. This was a large grower. It wasn't a multinational, so it wasn't just some faceless corporation. It was an entrepreneurial couple, Sharon DeWee and Tim van der Kuhle. They were the couple, and so they've lost all their income for that year. So really sad. But the good news is they can shift their focus to their algae production facility, which is called Alga Farm. They've got a dedicated algae growing facility. So always good to have a backup, and that's what they're doing. So best of luck to Sharon and Tim. And not very Dutch-sounding names, are they, Sharon and Tim? They've got very Dutch-sounding surnames. And it's not the only occurrence. So Steve van Adrichem of Antsu Vander, they're an orchid grower. He had another issue. On a particularly hot day, he had a power outage. So it wasn't a vent breaking, it wasn't a controller going down, it's just simply a power outage. Caused the temperature to rise in his greenhouse. And the roof vents failed to open, and the shading screens didn't close. And as a result, a majority of his orchids were burnt. And obviously, orchids are an ornamental crop, and if they become unsaleable because of that scorch, they might be alive, but they're unsaleable and have to be thrown away or gone through another cycle to produce fresh leafy growth. So in that particular instance, they lost 75% of their crop, or certainly saleable crop, the flowers, and they had to buy in more orchids from abroad, and some of the plants were rescuable as long as they had an apical meristem. I don't know if they're a Vander orchid, so the name of the company is Antsu Vander, and the Vander orchids are one of my favourites. They're almost like a flat orchid, and the leaves go either side, and then produce a really big ornamental spike, and you can grow them in special Vander vases. and they grow them suspended in this greenhouse. So the root systems were exposed to this extremely high air. And this is not a small operation. They're growing like, in a massive greenhouse, and all the vents failed. You can't manually open them. So it's not a case of they were just sat in the office or on holiday and they didn't notice that the automation wasn't working properly. Once the power outage occurred, then they couldn't do anything about it. You couldn't, if you open the doors, it's just still not going to have an effect. You couldn't manually pull the shade screening across and things like that. So all the leaves turned yellow, and you just, if you look on their Instagram account, there's just a greenhouse full of yellow orchid plants. It's disastrous. And then, the guy's almost crying talking about it. So, maybe something that has to be built into future greenhouses is the sort of what happens when there's a power failure. Like in Spain earlier this year, where the power went off for a day and all the greenhouses will have suffered there. Luckily, down in Almeria, it wasn't the height of summer, but there would have been issues around that as well. And so maybe if you're going to have a power outage, they often occur during periods of very, very high temperature. So because of the effect of the high temperature has on the electrical system. So if you're going to have a power outage, there's a good chance it's going to happen when it's very, very hot. It's not going to happen on a mild, overcast day unless something very strange has happened. So just something to bear in mind. When automation goes wrong, it can really mess up and it can destroy millions of pounds worth of crop, as in these two cases here. Real shame. All right. That's been Hydroponics Daily for today. Till tomorrow. Goodbye.